General Butler's troops found northern resistance comparatively light, while the 10th Army in the south found some of the strongest resistance yet encountered in the Pacific. The road to victory on Okinawa took nearly 3 months to travel and cost American forces almost 40,000 casualties, including the life of General Butler. The Okinawa campaign had been a highly successful air, sea, and ground operation carried out under conditions favoring the enemy. We had now reached the doorstep of Japan. By the end of May 1945, with the European War over, American military power was supreme from California to the China coast. During the early summer months, the tempo of air attacks on the Japanese main islands was sharply increased. B-29s of the Army Strategic Air Force, operating from bases in the Marianas, were averaging 1,200 sorties a week over enemy industrial targets. Fighter cover from Iwo Jima protected the big bombers against enemy interception. The B-29, the Enola Gay, took off from Tinian Island and headed for the industrial city of Hiroshima. At 8:15 that morning, the Enola Gay dropped the first atomic bomb on the city. 3 days later, the only other atomic weapons then in existence fell on Nagasaki, a nation that only a few years earlier had embarked upon a war to expand its empire, had reaped a bitter reward. Hiroshima and Nagasaki lay in ashes. A major portion of Japanese industry had been destroyed by the firebomb raids of our B-29s. Her mighty Navy and Air Force had been decimated, and the Imperial Army was a skeleton of its former self. And vanquished cautiously approached the matters of unconditional surrender of occupation. Under the Japanese military code of Bushido, nothing short of a direct order from the Emperor could have persuaded commanders to lay down their arms. But the Emperor had given the order, and the armed forces complied. American troops quickly flew to airstrips that enemy fighter planes had been using only a few days before. Last amphibious landing of the war, more troops went ashore to assist in the occupation. more than 1 million casualties had been avoided when the Japanese capitulation canceled invasion plans. Japanese officials later expressed their relief and gratitude for the fair and just treatment their nation received at the hands of occupation troops. Although the warlords who had brought on the conflict were subsequently brought to trial, the Japanese people were permitted and even encouraged to make the quickest possible transition to useful, peaceful activity without American interference. Engineer units immediately pitched in to help rebuild what our bombers had destroyed. After years of propaganda and heavily censored news, a free press kept the Japanese people abreast of daily developments. On the first day of the occupation, American forces exerted every effort to gain Japanese cooperation. Aboard the battleship Missouri in Tokyo Bay on the morning of September 2, 1945, Allied military leaders assembled for the signing of the formal peace agreement with Japan.
We are gathered here, representatives of the major warring powers, to conclude a solemn agreement whereby peace may be restored. The terms and conditions upon which surrender of the Japanese imperial forces is here to be given and accepted are contained in the instrument of surrender now before you. I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated. The Supreme Commander for the Allied powers will now sign on behalf of all the nations at war with Japan. Will General Wainwright and General Percival step forward and accompany me while I sign?
MacArthur used 5 pens to sign the historic documents and presented the first to General Jonathan Wainwright. The second went to British General Percival, the defender of Singapore. 2 to the National Archives, and the 5th MacArthur kept for himself. With the signing of the peace, which marked the end of World War II, General MacArthur said simply, "These proceedings are closed."